into the Gaming Discourse. I'm Tyler Frater alongside Richard D. the Cruz.
Hello.
And Chief Engineer, Lieutenant Commander Connor Raider.
Hello.
It is Monday, August 14th, 2023. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at the Gaming Discourse. Do I need to say X now? Is that what it's called?
No.
I don't go on that place anyways. I posted a meme though. If you want to check out real high quality memes, Baldur's Gate 3 memes, go to twitter.com/gaming discourse.
There you go.
So all you kids out there, go check out the meme that old Uncle Tyler made. It'll make you laugh and stuff. Patreon.com/the Gaming Discourse. You can support us for $2, $4, $7, $10. Get your name in the video credits. Early access to videos, access to our Discord server, more stuff like that. People that follow us on Patreon, I've been giving them updates every week about the Splinter Cell video that's coming up, and I've got a rather good update this week that I'll be sharing. Splinter Cell video is still a ways out, but there's been a couple good developments. We do have news. We're going to talk Baldur's Gate 3. Richard, you said basically it's more like
I haven't had good chunks of time to play Final Fantasy 16 and finish that or try to get to finish it. So what's today?
Today is
14th.
Monday.
Oh fuck. Tomorrow 4.0 hits for Genshin Impact.
Oh, really?
And that's the introduction of the next area, Fontaine, which is based around France, like France, Europe.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
we're done with like the India, Middle East area. We're going into like France now.
Wow.
So.
Alrighty, that'll be fun.
Yeah, I hope so.
It's like culturally inspired.
Oh yeah, like when they show off like
No, it's just France.
Yeah, when they show off the locales and vistas,
Google
it's
Maps.
just the type of like French Revolution style like outfitry,
okay.
like clothing,
So,
like French poodles are all over the place, and
Gotcha.
yeah,
Okay.
the type of
like French aristocracy, like
Yeah,
white
basically.
makeup and
so this
that
is
kind of thing.
This is the land because as I've explained before, each land is something. Like the European is freedom, China's contracts. This one is justice, the land of justice. So there's a court system involved and everything, and so
Awesome.
So story-wise,
sounds
you're
good.
probably going to get into trouble, like always.
Oh boy.
Hell yeah.
Boy. Those crazy kids. Okay, so Connor,
Yes.
let's talk Baldur's Gate 3. You've played a couple hours.
Mm-hmm.
I've put, I think, around 20 hours into it now. I didn't have it last time we spoke. You can do the math. I've been playing it a lot, but in defense, a good 2 hours of that was in the character creator. That Larian Studios released an infographic. It was like 10% of players have spent an hour or more in the character creator. I'm proudly a member of that 10% that spent a ton of time in the character creator doing whatever. What are your first impressions, Connor?
It is a solid D&D game.
Okay.
Like, it is really true to form D&D.
Yeah.
Having run multiple editions of D&D, having played multiple editions of D&D, currently running 3 different campaigns.
Oof.
Yeah. I know a thing or two about D&D, and this is a solid D&D game.
Yeah, so I've played D&D a couple times. We all have experience with tabletop games.
Mm-hmm.
I've played with Connor, and we've all done different levels. I've DM'd a few like Witcher tabletop role playing. So tabletop role playing games are like separate from video games, in that the rules are sort of kind of have to use your imagination a lot. The rules are set in place so that there's way more possibilities, right? So Baldur's Gate 3, and Larian did this with Divinity as well. Divinity and Baldur's Gate 3, the sort of the direction they're taking the game is trying to recreate the tabletop experience in video game form. Not like in the sense that you're moving on a grid, but trying to make a video game version of a tabletop experience that's not just Tabletop Simulator or something like that. And that's an incredibly complicated thing to do. So far, it feels like they're doing... I mean, from what I've played, it's a phenomenal game thus far. It's my favorite game I've played this year. You can see sort of their philosophy in making games and how, again, it's sort of like how seriously they take the tabletop experience, because I don't think you can necessarily say that about RPGs like this in general, or party-based RPGs. And RPGs are on a spectrum, right? So I was reading somebody, I think someone from PC Gamer wrote a piece, and in it they talked about all the RPGs I've played, and they listed like God of War in there. Like, God of War really an RPG? I don't know. I don't think so. It's more, if you're going to classify it an RPG, it's more of an action RPG, right? So anyway, RPG is this term that's really like lost a lot of meaning because of how fluid genres have become. But this is sort of, when I think of like hardcore RPG, this is what I think about.
Yeah.
Something where combat's really granular and really, really tactical. And there's so much depth in your class and the benefits and drawbacks of not having a certain class or bringing a certain class with you or something like that. I've had to rewire my brain, because playing games like Pillars, which is also, I think, in that camp of like hardcore RPG, makes you think about things a certain way. And Baldur's Gate is a different or Baldur's Gate 3 is a different version that does things completely differently. So as an example, and this was true in the first Baldur's Gate as well, but in Pillars of Eternity, your formation matters. So if you're going through a dungeon, you want your fighters up front, you want your spellcasters in the back, right? Because as soon as you meet enemies, they're going to run up on you. When they get engaged with one of your combatants, they're going to start fighting that person. They won't try and like rush past you or anything like that. In Baldur's Gate, enemies don't give a shit. They'll go straight for the weakest person in your party. So it's more about trying to figure out how to avoid things like that. And of course, you can split apart your party, and you can position them, and you can make them hide. I've done a ton of combat where I kept one person almost like in reserve, just away from the battle. Started the battle, and then I switched to the person that was outside the battle and sort of like brought them in and ran around, and then it's like, okay, I'll enter the battle right here, right? And sort of entered it in a place where I could ambush somebody with like one character. So while other RPGs think about the party as a whole, I think like Pillars, you're not playing, you create a character, and that character is the main character, but you're not necessarily playing as that character when you play the game. You're playing as that party. That party is a cohesive unit, and there's like synergies and stuff like that that's all meant to work together. I feel like in Baldur's Gate 3, the philosophy is not, yeah, there are party synergies, but you're not a party, you're just 4 characters working together, as opposed to one party. I think there's a distinction there. And that, again, is where I think the tabletop experience comes in. Because in a tabletop experience, different players may have different opinions on what to do, because you're all human. So it's not like one person controls the entire party, like in a Pillars of Eternity or something like that. So seeing that, and Divinity was very similar in this regard, where you could do a lot of different stuff in Divinity, and there's a crazy amount of dynamic gameplay and stuff like that, but they seem to just take that and run with it. And of course, it's based on Dungeons and Dragons, so there's like a whole rule set there. Connor, you said that it seemed like it was almost like a one-to-one recreation,
more or less,
of D&D rules.
Yeah.
I'll ask one question: are there vampires that can go in the sun in D&D?
Not that I'm aware of, but I'm sure it's happened. I'm sure Wizards of the Coast did something like that.
Okay, because I am interested in how Baldur's Gate 3 takes liberties with the D&D license to do certain things. Now, at the same time, D&D I don't think has ever been a game where it's like you have to follow. The whole idea is that you take this world, they lay out a big map that you can take, but they give you the rules to do whatever you want with the world. So, narrative consistency, I think, is in the most.
That is actually a big debate in D&D circles.
Well, I mean, I think, without playing...
Because there's several schools of that. There's RAW, rules as written, rules as intended, RAI, and then what most people end up doing is there's a disclaimer at the front of the book that says, hey, these are guidelines, do what you want.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a broad whatever.
Yeah.
But so let's see, other thoughts I have. The characters how they're written are really interesting. Nobody is like nice. Everybody's kind of an asshole right now, which is interesting. I don't know if that's because the characters I've met are just mean, or if it will develop and characters, their dispositions will change. But each character is really intriguing. I created a character. I created a sorceress. And so it's a lot of DPS and stuff like that. But I've met, 5, 6 other party members thus far. And I'm like, some of them I figured out really well. Like I know how I found a barbarian, and it's like, okay, I know exactly. As soon as I saw the barbarian's moveset, I was like, okay, I know exactly how to use this barbarian. And
Step 1, get angry. Step 2, hit things. Step 3, repeat.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's characters like Will, and Will is a warlock. And the warlock's like an in-between of a wizard and, I don't know, what would you say, Connor? A melee class of some sort. I don't.
No, so
don't overcomplicate it.
So a warlock is a half caster.
Okay.
They're not a full caster because they don't get as many spell slots and abilities for spells as true casters like wizards, sorcerers. But they're not really melee. They're half casters, but they're not martial classes.
Okay. It's like purple. Not really a blue. It's kind of an in between. But I haven't really figured out how to use him yet. He has some cool abilities and stuff, but it just feels like there are other characters with more powerful, readily available.
Now I don't know how
attacks.
I don't know how Baldur's Gate 3 approaches warlocks because I haven't hit that yet. So I don't know if they are leaning a little bit more into the martial side, but as it stands in D&D right now, warlocks are just a caster class, but they don't have a full spectrum of spells. They're a half caster. They're really hampered
that sounds about right.
They're really hampered by their ability or their inability to cast a bunch of spells because they have very few. What they shine with is their cantrips. Because they can specialize their cantrips to how they need them. Based on
he does have Will has a lot of spells. I guess we just have to see a more technical comparison, I guess. But yeah, as far as the gameplay goes, the gameplay is really good. It's also unforgiving. You really have to pay attention to the environment, to your surroundings. You often get the drop on enemies, so you really have to think about how you want to approach a fight. And I have found oftentimes if a fight seems like it's going to be difficult, it is, and you should look for a different way to approach this fight. Gnolls, I hate gnolls so much. Gnolls are like these. They're like werewolves, they're hyenas.
They're demonic hyenas.
Yeah, demonic hyenas. They're the most horrible beings on Earth, at least that I've met in Baldur's Gate 3 so far. But I came upon gnolls outside of a cave, and somebody was trapped in the cave, and they were throwing fire bombs at the mouth of the cave to keep the gnolls out. So all the gnolls were sort of facing the cave. So I was like, okay. So I could fight all these gnolls. But there's like a couple different gnolls on like hills and stuff around the mouth of this cave. So it's like they're at different elevations and it's going to be a weird fight. So I decided, okay, I'm going to see if there's another way into this cave and I can maybe fight them from inside of it somehow. And I did. I found an alternate route into the cave. And once I got in there, the guys in there were like, hey, we need help finding these gnolls. So then I was able to set up traps in front of in the cave's mouth. And then initiate the fight, and that it went from a battle where I'd have to figure out how to take on all these gnolls to 300 Spartans, where I funneled them all through the mouth of the cave, and I blew up a couple barrels, so the mouth of the cave was covered in fire, so that ate away at their health as they came in. And yeah, I made it a much more manageable fight, where if I fought them out in the open, it would have been much more
cool.
Manly.
No, but it would have been deadlier, much deadlier. So there's all kinds of stuff.
Fight gnolls in the open. Be a man.
Baldur's Gate 3 does open, I think, more slowly than Divinity, because Divinity starts off and you get teleportation gloves pretty quick, and you can do all kinds of stuff with those teleportation gloves. Baldur's Gate 3, it seems like it starts off a little bit slower with the stuff that you're able to manipulate and go crazy with. But it seems like there may be a wider bag of tricks. I did not play very much of Divinity. I played a lot, but I didn't get very far in the game. But it was really good. But yeah, I think that's pretty much...
I was about to say, I don't know if it starts off slow, but then you meant what you were saying.
Relative to...
I was about to say, I don't know, getting sent to hell within the first, start of the game.
Relative to like your abilities and the stuff happening around you. Divinity, you wake up, you're on this prison island, you get teleportation gloves, and you're sneaking into a castle and doing all kinds of crazy shit. And this one, it's like you're on a beach and you're kind of just...
Both games start on a beach.
They do, and you're kind of just going through the wilderness, and maybe you find something, maybe you find something else, but it's not like, whoa, holy crap, right off the bat. Both games, you can turn the wrong corner and within an hour get destroyed by an enemy, just absolutely destroyed by an enemy, so that's great. But it's made a great first impression, and it keeps me thinking about all the different characters. And of course, any good RPG, each character is really interesting. They all have a little, maybe not secret, but like I'll spoil one thing about a character. So there's a character, because he's the character most people are playing apparently, named Gale. And Gale's a sorcerer. And Gale has this thing where he has to absorb the magic from a magical item periodically for some reason, and he hasn't told me why yet, but you have to sacrifice some magical item, which is fairly rare. So it's like, and if I don't know what happens if he doesn't get this magical item of his. I don't know if he leaves the party or if he dies or if he attacks you or something. But so it's like, he doesn't tell me why. So I'm in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, I gotta hopefully find a magical item I don't mind parting with, so we can figure that out. And all the other characters have little things about them where there's something about them personally that they're trying to figure out, and they're not, too keen on revealing that or anything just yet until you get better to know them. So, having a lot of fun with it. One thing that I think I understand a lot of people's frustrations, because it is supposed to be sort of a video game tabletop thing, and there are settings in the game that mess with this, but there are times where you just roll a die.
Mm-hmm.
It's a digital die roll to see if you succeed or fail something. And I think a lot of people find that frustrating, because if you have, a high stat, you can still fail the roll because you just rolled poorly or something like that. And in tabletop, that's just the way it goes. Mm-hmm. And I think in video games, people don't necessarily want it that way. I don't know. But I will say one thing that frustrated me was I met a dog, and Will was with me. So I was like, I'm going to cast Talk to Animals. So I get into a conversation with this dog. Dog was scared. So I was like, okay, I need to calm it down. And I picked a dialogue option, and the dog hated that dialogue option and initiated combat. And I was like, hey, Larian, you can fuck right off. I'm not fighting a dog. So I loaded the previous save, and I refused to do that. So there were some things where I was like, I'm not doing this. I'm not going to fight this puppy in the middle of the woods because I said the wrong thing. I'm sorry.
Fun fact,
I don't give a shit what the die roll is.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So there are things, I've been pretty good at like not save scumming though. You can do it if you want. It doesn't bother me. But I like to try and limit myself because I can ruin the experience by trying to make things too perfect. So I've been doing a good job at that, and proud of myself. But if that's how you want to play, you want to be, I do that in stealth games. Like in stealth games, a 30-minute mission will take me 3 hours because I have to like get by every guard perfectly or something like that. So, okay. Anything else you want to say about Baldur's Gate 3?
I don't have a lot to say about it because I just haven't put enough time into it.
Sure.
It is a very bombastic beginning, though.
Yeah, it's an exciting beginning, but I think just in terms of how it delivers gameplay mechanics and stuff like that.
I was just going that. It really will pull you in, and you will lose time to this game.
Yes, it is very good. Okay, hit the ad. Thanks for listening. If you like our content, please consider subscribing or leaving a like and comment. You can find us at patreon.com/thegamingdiscourse. And our tiers are $2, $4, $7, and $10 and include getting your name in the video credits, early access, and access to our Discord server.
Hey, Richard, how is that monster Java?
It's really delicious.
The most disgusting drink.
It says this guy.
I'm sorry, okay?
All right.
I'm sorry.
I hate monsters too, but I don't hate this monster.
You don't hate that one specifically? I sent you that video that proves monsters are demonic, so I don't know why you're still drinking them. Okay, so we're going to get into this Axios report published just a few hours ago.
Speaking of
Stephen
monsters.
Totillo. Speaking of monsters, yeah, no joke. So some background here. I'll just give you the title. Savvy Group was the partner in the Embracer deal that went under. A little bit of background. A few months ago, a $2 billion deal with Embracer Group fell through. We didn't know with whom the deal was or why or anything like that. Now, according to 4 sources with knowledge of the deal, Axios is reporting that it was the Savvy Business Group, which is funded by the Saudi Arabian government. The deal would have had Savvy interest, the development and publishing, invest in the development and publishing of games from Embracer. Axios also says sources were clear about Savvy being the other group, but they were less certain about why Savvy walked away. Sounded like the deal was pretty close. They had a verbal commitment, and then things, I think the phrase that they used was at the midnight hour or whatever, things just sort of broke down. Don't know why. Last June, Savvy bought $1 billion worth of shares in Embracer, and at the time, Embracer CEO Lars Wingefors, I believe, acknowledged accepting investment from an entity in a non-democratic country, which is a very nice way of putting it, but said Savvy has genuine ambitions to support the global games industry. Did we have...
I think they should change their group name since they can't land that deal. Not very savvy.
Got him.
I was curious to what happened here when the news broke out a couple months ago. And for some reason, I just never thought about, Saudis. Because they've been trying to
they're putting
in
money
the background,
in
squeeze into things we talk about Tencent all the time, but we don't really look at the Saudi Arabia side of things.
It's a similar case. I'm not a foreign policy expert. I'm not an expert on the Middle East, but you have, I wrote down his name because last time I forgot it and put out something wrong. Mohammed bin Salman, who's the Saudi crown prince, right? And you have this new sort of reformation, I guess, that's been going on over the past 5-10 years, where it's like, hey, we're going to change the way that we do things. We're going to give women's rights we're going to give women more rights. We're going to, lay back on the social conservatism and stuff like that, among other things. And, and I think rightfully so, that is sort of a cosmetic and false for really the more complicated stuff that's going on there. We talk about the murder of Jamal Khashoggi and things like that. So you are correct in that there's been a lot of money thrown around by that. I'm trying to think of the name of the fund. It doesn't matter. It's a fund controlled by the Saudi Arabian government. Live golf tournament's been won. They've gotten into pro wrestling, right? Stuff like that. And yeah, video games is a new one with the Savvy Group. Now, if I remember correctly, the Savvy Group was supposed to be or at one point, I remember seeing that the Savvy Group was tied pretty heavily, public investment fund. That's what it is, Saudi Arabian public investment fund. The Savvy Group was tied heavily to esports and stuff like that, right? So when we talk about the global games business, the global games business is so massive and it has so many segments and so many tranches, for lack of a better term, that it's where are you going to put this money and how are you going to invest it? Because if you talk to Strauss Zelnick, then Take-Two just invested a bunch of money in the mobile sector, right? And why is this important? It's important because I think if we're talking about companies or public funds investing in games, it's important to consider where they're investing that money. Because if it is like esports, then that's one thing. If it's like service-based mobile stuff, that's another thing. And then you contextualize that differently. When it comes to Saudi Arabia, they have money in Nintendo, they have money in Embracer. And it's like, what? I don't know, what is the purpose of that? It doesn't seem to, because if you're investing in Nintendo, you're kind of you know what you're getting.
Yes.
Nintendo's not going to, well, you know how Nintendo makes money, and one of the ways they're not making money is mobile games, right? Embracer seems to be, I think, closer to Nintendo than they are Take-Two, but not necessarily close to Nintendo relative to Nintendo.
Yeah.
I guess this is all a very long way of saying, I don't know what outside of just a general washing of reputations and of, I don't know, public perception, there doesn't seem to be like a real goal with investing in games here, which itself is annoying. And the other thing is, I don't know. Every day somebody does something, and that you're a part of a system that you can't really control, an unethical system you can't really control. But when you're the CEO of a massive company like Embracer, I think you have the power to turn this kind of money down or to find it somewhere else. So when we criticize Take-Two for buying Zynga and having that become a big part of their business, I think that's completely valid, because these aren't companies that are. I would not read this as companies trying their best to survive or something like that, like an everyday person might would in the decisions they make. I think this is different. And you have the power to find investment and sustainable business in other places that's not taking money from China or Chinese firms or the Public Investment Fund. Now, the difference between something like Tencent and the Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund, that the Public Investment Fund is directly tied to the government. Like, it's a straight line. There's no like bumps and bridges or anything like that. Whereas Tencent is its own entity, but if you're doing business with Tencent, you're going to have to deal with the Communist Party, right?
Right, yeah.
So it's not like the line may not be as straight in that case,
right.
But just like with Roblox, how Roblox wanted to get into the Chinese market, so they had to sort of curtail, and they had that document, here's how to conform to CCC policy, So it's like, if you're doing business with a big Chinese firm like Tencent, or what's the other one? There's one other one that's really big. I'm not going to remember the name. Yeah, there is. I thought they start with an E too. Doesn't matter. The routes to like direct intervention, I guess, are different. And I don't think these are cultures that necessarily value art or innovation.
Right.
For a myriad of reasons. And so if you're investing into something that should be an art form, an emerging art form, then that's a problem. Because if you're not coming from a place that values art, then how are you going to invest in it, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I think that's probably another reason why it's not necessarily about doing anything specific as much as it is a cleanup of public perception. And just in case anybody, I don't know, I don't want to come off like xenophobic or anything. America is not a perfect country in any slice of the pie. It has committed numerous acts of inhumanity, and we just got out of 2 wars that were massive acts of inhumanity. So I hope I'm not coming off as like xenophobic. It's not necessarily that I think our country is like better than those countries. But
no, there are specific things that you can point to and be like, that's a problem.
Yes.
You know, so.
Yes, I am not above pointing at the United States and saying that's shitty, because
we have been for the last 3 years with Activision Blizzard.
Yes, because there's plenty to do with that regard. Is there anything you guys would like to see?
Were you thinking of NetEase?
Yes, NetEase.
Oh, NetEase. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And they are heavily invested in mobile stuff, I think. Because they were Blizzard's, but then them and Blizzard broke up or something.
Who cares?
Yeah, who gives a shit? Okay, are we ready to move on?
Yeah, we can move on.
Nintendo has applied. Speaking of Nintendo, Nintendo has applied for patents on Tears of the Kingdom mechanics. This was first reported by Automaton, a site that covers Japanese gaming news. Patents have been filed in both Japan and the US. According to Automaton, between July 10th and August 4th, Nintendo made 32 patents public. 31 of those seem to be related to Tears of the Kingdom. Patents included the Ultra Hand ability and what the loading screen does when Link fast travels. Not a lawyer. I don't know anything about Japan. I could point it out on a map. Other than that, I don't know what laws are like there. I don't know. I'm not an expert on U.S. patent law, but I think I'll put it succinctly. This feels silly, and I don't care if there's an actual legal standing behind it. You should not be able to own or have the rights to a gameplay mechanic. I don't know. It's not like a song or anything like that. It's a way to have a physics engine do something. But again, the legalities of this are beyond me. We've had similar stuff in the past with Shadow of Mordor.
Monolith, yeah.
Famously.
Is it Monolith?
Yes. Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
But I think it was Warner Brothers.
Right. They patented the Nemesis system.
Did they patent the Nemesis system? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's why do that? And again, it's not because I'm not going to believe it's because somebody said, we need to patent this really specific way we do this Nemesis system mechanic. I think it's greed. I think it's how do we... And not even a good source of greed, because it's not like WB's doing a whole lot with the goddamn Nemesis system.
They aren't. They could have in several games in the past, but the next game that they're deciding to use it on is that Wonder Woman game coming out.
I didn't even know there was a Wonder Woman game.
Yeah, it was announced at E3 2 years ago.
Oh, okay.
But even then, that doesn't fit for me. A Nemesis system fits with Batman. How many people are trying to come after Batman consistently?
I
don't know who's coming after
Batman.
I don't know who's coming after Wonder Woman all the time.
Yeah, Chris Pine.
Yeah,
hey. No, it's dumb, and I don't know if we could attribute the lack of Nemesis system mechanics to that patent or anything. I have no idea. I know the Assassin's Creed was it Odyssey?
Yeah, with the mercenaries.
Similar.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know if other games since have had it.
It's so weird because you're right. It has that mercenary system, but it's just simply. I can't remember if it's
it's a linear progression of enemies that are being hunted.
Yeah, and the Nemesis system, I think the thing about that is that they're actively chasing you, hunting you. But I know that mercenaries is they're just in an area, and if you happen to be in that area, they're gonna find you.
Well, no,
they chase you down.
Yeah, they'll chase you down.
And
I
don't know the differences. Yeah,
I think it's more of the nuance of how you can interact with them in the Nemesis system, because and them coming with back. The mercenaries, it's just. They're just coming to fight you. You can't turn them. They are coming to fight you because they want to prove that they're stronger than you.
Regardless.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be able to own a gameplay mechanic. I'm sorry. A way of making something. I don't give a shit what the law says. I don't care.
Bandai Namco owns mini games in the loading screen.
Oh, and that was something. Okay, thank you for bringing that up, because that was something that that I had in the back of my head, but I couldn't remember the example. And I know that there are people that have attributed not having interactivity in loading screens to that. Now, yes. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if a developer has ever said, we didn't do this because we didn't want to get sued by Bandai Namco. But are there any that come off the top of your head?
No, I was actually thinking about it while I was sitting here, because I do know that you play Galaga with Ridge Racer during the loading screens, and then in Tekken Tag Tournament you play the space shooter thing. It's really neat. But when I think about games after that, the next one would be one of the Dragon Ball games, and that's Bandai Namco.
You spin. I remember the Dragon Ball game Budokai.
Yeah.
Where I don't remember what the old man's name is.
Each one had a different one, but yeah, there's like Roshi, like Master Roshi, like spin something, or like you got to stamp out like capsules that come up. You got to stamp out like however many, but yeah, that's the last one I can remember. But even then, nowadays it doesn't really make because loading is so fast.
You don't have loading. You have like you don't have many opportunities for loading screens. So with SSDs and stuff like that. Still, the principle applies. Yeah, and that should not exist anyway.
Yeah. I wonder. Bayonetta doesn't count, but the loading screen is your training. Like you can just do combos and stuff while the game is loading.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know. I've never played Bayonetta.
And then when it's like done loading, it's like, hey, press start to continue. But that's not a loading game. You're technically playing the game. So
okay. And in God of War,
I was gonna say God of War, the
loading screen is you running on the tree on Yggdrasil, going from door to door. I always assumed that was the loading screen.
Yeah, that's the loading screen. Yes.
And I always had a theory about that because if you turn around, so you spawned on the Yggdrasil, and you're supposed to run forward against a circle. But if you go backward, I always had a theory that it's faster because when the game loads in, it puts the door like down the path that you're facing. So it gives time for the game to load, and then it gives like another section of running for you to run up to the door. But if you turn around, the section always felt faster because the door spawns in, but you're closer to it because it subtracts that little moment in time where you're just spent running towards the door. It might be a placebo.
Because I don't think it specifically picks a point on the ring. It's like, all right, it's going to load in here. You have to get around to it. I think it's just a radius around.
Maybe.
Kratos, couldn't remember his name. A radius around Kratos that when it's done loading, the door spawns.
It could be. I don't know. You shouldn't own game mechanics. That's the point of this. You shouldn't own game mechanics. Okay, and another quick story from Axios here. Written by Stephen Totilo, Gavia Beharaj, and Sarah Weiss. They broke down how sequels are taking longer to develop. Experts tell Axios that there are many reasons for this slowdown, including the pandemic, the increased complexity of modern game design, and changes to gaming's core business model. So you have games like I don't know, Last of Us is probably not a great example, but you have God of War, and then the next God of War came out 3 or 4 years later. Same thing with like Horizon Zero Dawn. Right. Back in the day, you'd have a game once every 2 years. Mm-hmm. It was like 2002 2002 was Splinter Cell. 2003 was Pandora Tomorrow. 2004 was Chaos Theory, I think. Different studios. Yeah. But still, you had different studios working on sequels to a franchise. You don't necessarily have that now. Yeah. Call of Duty is like an outlier. Right. It's more the exception to the rule. Anyway, also, this quote, fans expect bigger, more graphically detailed games each time out. Several developers mentioned to Axios, which requires bigger teams and richer budgets, end quote. Big games are also made with bigger budgets, which means there's more investment, which means the return needs to be bigger. Sort of a vicious cycle. Reading from the story again, quote, to make their money back, publishers have de-emphasized quick turnaround sequels by diverting resources into a single big game's expansions and seasons of post-release content, chasing recurring live service game revenue, end quote. Okay.
So I'm going to go ahead and just disagree with the more graphically detailed games, that what fans expect, because one of the most loved, not game sequel, but franchise sequel, Fallout New Vegas, still looks like a potato compared to the previous game that came before it, which also looked like potatoes. Everything is just potato faced.
But green.
Yeah. Well, no. It's
well, the one before it was green.
Yeah. This one's yellow. Yeah.
Russet.
I think. Do we think that statement that? So first, I think there's multiple things that are interesting about this story, because they say the Axios speaks with experts. Now, Stephen Totilo, I think one of the weird things about, and this is off the top of my head, maybe I'm wrong, but like if you cover science, say you're covering the James Webb Space Telescope, right? And you're a journalist that covers science. You're going to have a latent knowledge of science from your years covering science.
Sure, yeah.
But you're not going to have anywhere near the knowledge of a doctorate degree person who works on the James Webb Space Telescope, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because the difference in expertise there is light years, right? Now, you think about video games. When we talk about the business of video games, Stephen Totilo has been covering the business of video games for more than 10 years. I would consider him an expert. So it's weird that there is this like need for certain journalists to have to contextualize the news with experts, and these experts are coming from like the investment field, where they're looking at the games industry from like an investment standpoint rather than, I don't know, like a how the business has evolved standpoint. Because a lot of these quotes, Totilo knows.
Yeah.
Like he's known this for a long time. We've known this for a long time. Casual people, maybe someone that is scrolling through Axios, they never played a video game in their life and they read this, they learn this for the first time, sure. But that's just something that, I don't know, I've been thinking about recently. Because when we read like Jason Schreier's stories at Bloomberg, like this guy at wealth management, fucking .org says Take-Two is up this month. But it's like, not investment advice. Not investment advice. But it's like, okay, but a lot of these facts about like, hey, we need live service mechanics in games. That's like something generic that I think most people that cover the industry or follow the industry will know. And so as journalists, do we need to find those experts that'll tell us the things that we already know? Does that give us a certain level of like, I don't know, credibility, even though the space it's coming from is a like financial sector space, a thought for another day. That was number one.
So you tell us you're the journalist.
And number two, well, honestly, no, I don't think so. I don't think I should have to talk to some guy who last talked with Jared Vinnett about credit default swaps. And he's going to tell me why, buying into Take-Two before GTA 6 comes out is a good idea. No, I already know that. I can tell the readers that. And if the readers call me an SJW because I believe in trans rights, then okay, fine. But their opinion's not going to change because Jared Vinnett got everybody jacked to the tits on Take-Two Interactive. That was multiple layers of references.
Yes.
Okay, back to the story at hand. Do we think that quote is accurate? That fans expect bigger, more graphically detailed games each time out? Obviously, financially, it's correct. Yes, that's going to require bigger budgets. But is that true? Do fans expect games the next one, to be like this massive upgrade, visually or gameplay game time wise?
I think we're hitting a point of fatigue when it comes to games getting larger and more in depth and more activities to do. Because it seems like every AAA title now has 800 collectibles. It has near infinite side missions to do, and the story. And especially when you look at like more non-linear focus games where it's more not true sandbox but open world, it's become saturated with larger maps, more activities, more fucking radio towers to go unlock so you can unlock the map more, to where it's become jokes within
Sure.
the community at large about these activities, especially in Ubisoft games.
Yeah, sure.
But I think we're hitting a point where smaller, not necessarily smaller development teams, but smaller games by medium-sized companies are going to start getting more traction. One game that I was playing over the weekend, Inscription. It is a strategy card game that is very fun. I put 10 hours into it, and I had a blast with it. And I think that we're going to hit a tipping point where the games are going to be marketing, with 800 hours of content, to where that's just going to not be feasible for a lot of people anymore, and they're going to be looking at different avenues where the games are more digestible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the statement that was made that was quoted is, in my eyes, a half truth. Video games and the movie industry particularly, are two sides of the same coin to an extent, and we have sequels for movies when they'd come out in the 80s and 90s, because the blockbuster summer movie thing was so big. It was always, the movie is bigger, the movie is better, blah blah blah, stuff like that. Yeah. And so it made X amount of money. You've always had that with games. Mario 2, he's bigger, he's better, he does more things. It looks better, especially when the mid 90s started to come around and PC gaming started to get bigger. You can trace back these covers of magazines. These graphics are the best you've ever seen. It's only going to get better, whatever. And we've kind of been indoctrinated to having those statements consistently up until, still currently to this day. The last big one was stupid Red Dead Redemption, and it's just like the anatomy of the horse,
its balls shrink when it's cold outside.
Yeah, it shrinks, and it's like, why the fuck why do I want that? I don't want that. But for those who grew up in the 80s and 90s, a lot of them remember a time where you bought a game and you got the game and nothing, and you didn't have microtransactions, stuff like that. And I think those folks make up a good amount of the gaming population nowadays, and they're starting to push back and starting to be more vocal about what they want from their game, and they don't want something that's 200 hours. Sometimes that's nice. Mm-hmm. Baldur's Gate is a good example. Zelda's a good example, and other games like that are good examples. But when a large majority, what it feels like, twice a month, a live service game comes out that's begging for your time and trying to pull you away. Like Connor said, people are getting fatigued over it.
Yeah.
And the other problem, the other side of it, and I think it's where the half truth comes from, is that these studios, these investors, these shareholders are probably going, we need to look at what the people are saying. And the people they're going to are the people on Twitter and the people on Reddit. They're seeing the vocal minority of, where's my 60 frames a second? Where's my 4K? Where's my
there's probably
blah, blah,
that, which is depressing.
I think that has some influence on it. But then you get the good stuff. Once again, we'll go back to the two biggest examples of the year, which is Zelda and Baldur's Gate 3. Full, complete games. One on one side of the spectrum regarding fidelity and graphical prowess, kind of low, and one that I think Baldur's Gate 3 is a pretty good looking game.
Yeah.
I also have to take into account, this game looks really good, and it's 300 plus hours. Look at all this stuff. And so I think people will see that, or are seeing that, and that in turn becomes the praise that is needed for Baldur's Gate being the best rated game on Metacritic, followed by Zelda Tears of the Kingdom and stuff like that. But it's that same thing with the movie industry. Barbie made over $1 billion. They're not wondering why Barbie made $1 million. They just see that we need to make more movies about toys.
Yeah, or they see, I don't know, this decision makers and things and people like that. They think they see the reasons that something resonates, and they take that and run. And I think that view, they also have sort of a cognitive bias, because it's always the thing that is, I don't know, the easiest to reproduce.
Yeah.
So Jason Schreier, when Tears of the Kingdom came out, he tweeted something to the effect of why people like Tears of the Kingdom. And it's like, open world, blah, blah, blah. And then what executives will think? Every game needs crafting.
Yes.
Because it's like because they're morons.
Yeah.
And so there's a completely unnuanced like view of why something is successful. So when we look at games and massive budgets, I don't know, what creates that budget? Why was Horizon Forbidden West so expensive? I'm not an expert, but I assume it was the visuals. There's a lot there. And you have the technology where it's like every character, when they talk with Aloy, has their own animations. It looks like somebody acted a line, acted a scene, and then they just went ahead and put that into the game, as opposed to animating the same, 20 animations for every character talking, something like that. Okay, that's expensive, but why was Forbidden West good? Well, the combat works in outside of those other things, right? The combat being good is mutually exclusive with characters looking cool when they talk, Baldur's Gate characters look pretty good when they talk, but they don't look anywhere near as good as Horizon Zero Dawn when they talk, or Horizon Forbidden West. But is anybody going to care?
Right.
And if you can save money there, then isn't that a place to save money? And if you can save money and create a more sustainable business, then isn't that what you should do? So the question of why games are becoming more expensive, is there a truth to, I don't know, you have like focus groups filled with people who just decide one day, they don't really have like a set idea of principles or a set idea of what they want in a game, but they just sort of, and it's not because they're dumb, it's because they have lives and they don't think about this shit all the time. So when they're brought into a focus group and they're asked, what do you want to see in the game? They just think, I don't know, better graphics. I want a lot of playtime because I don't have a lot of money to spend on a game, And so executives take that and they're like, okay, this is what people want. As opposed to something where it's like, I feel like we can see examples of games that buck trends and are successful. Assassin's Creed Mirage is going to be 20 to 25 hours. I'm sure there were people mad on Twitter, but overall, was the response horribly negative? I don't think so. The Outer Worlds, it's going to be 20 to 25 hours. Was the response overwhelmingly negative? I don't think so. Elden Ring was a massive game. Its art direction is unparalleled, but from a pure fidelity standpoint, it's pretty good. Not incredible, but pretty good.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So again, there's a game that sort of, it seems like they prioritized certain things and didn't prioritize other things and was successful. Tears of the Kingdom. One, because of the hardware that it's on, is not, again, art direction over fidelity, but it's not a game that has high fidelity. You are correct. But it's going to be super successful. It might win Game of the Year. What about Baldur's Gate 3? Baldur's Gate 3 bucks a trend because it's a super complex RPG, much like Elden Ring was a super difficult action RPG, right? And maybe RPG. But anyway, so what does that tell you? That tells you that there, just like with Elden Ring, that there is a market for hardcore, intense games that aren't... Now, there is an easy mode in Baldur's Gate 3.
Okay.
But I think there is like a story mode that makes combat a lot easier. But I think a lot of people are enjoying the sort of standard or even the harder mode as well.
Yeah.
So what does that all tell us? That tells us that there are plenty of people across video games that are okay with smaller titles, that are okay with games that may not have high fidelity if you just make a good game and get other categories and you hit it on other categories, right?
Right.
But it's like the executive mind doesn't think that way. Because the executive mind is all home runs. It's all slam dunks.
Yeah.
It's none of the boring triangle offense shit or, hitting a bunch of singles and stealing bases to torture a couple metaphors. And in that, we get really expensive games and running away budgets. When it comes to live service stuff, I don't know. I really dislike it. I think when executives talk about live service economies and player demand, and that this is what players want. This is what players want. I think they're being disingenuous because it's an economy that's based on whales, and it's a lucrative economy.
Yeah.
But it's not one where that people actually want. I think if you sat a bunch of people down and you gave them, I don't know, Diablo 4 with no microtransactions and all the stuff that you can get microtransactions you can find in game. Maybe you can just get it somewhere, or maybe you can go to a dungeon and you complete this dungeon and you get this armor. You just get it in the game versus what we have now. Right. I think more people would rather have the one where you can get stuff in game and you don't have to worry about shilling out $20 extra to get some cosmetic item or something like that. Yeah. And could Diablo 4 exist like that? Yeah, of course it could. I'm not going to believe for a second that Blizzard couldn't exist as a company if they put out Diablo 4 without microtransactions.
Right.
But the reason Diablo 4 exists like that is because it's lucrative. And when they say there's demand for it, I think, again, that's being disingenuous. Because, yes, there's demand, but I think more people would prefer the other one. They just don't live in a world where the other option exists, right? It's kind of like, okay, I don't want to get political. You give people examples for like healthcare, right? It's like, what would you rather prefer, access to healthcare or just healthcare? And everyone's like, well, I'd prefer healthcare. It's like, well, there you go. Now, okay, politics, whatever. That's a bad example. So I think when we have these conversations, all that nuance that we just went through, Richard, I've hit your computer like 6 times. I apologize. All those examples that we just went through, when journalists write stories like this, and it gets packed into this cube, and this cube is fans want bigger stuff. It's like, wait, no, stop, because that's not necessarily true. Now, Jared Vinnett might think that's true because the only person Jared Vinnett talks to is Strauss Zelnick. So it's like, yeah, that's his only point of reference. But I think the demand in the games industry, what people actually want to play, and what people are willing to buy, and what there's a market for is way more variable and diverse than what the AAA industry provides. And a lot of the stuff is self-imposed. If they could find ways to limit budgets, not cut corners, but to limit budgets, there's probably ways to do that.
Oh, absolutely.
But they just don't do it. And then we get into this cycle where they think that every game needs to have a $500 million budget, and they act like they're the victims when they're self-imposing that financial risk upon themselves. And that's infuriating. Yeah. It's so infuriating. Anyways, I'm just going to keep talking in circles because, again, you can point at examples of cases where that's just not. And Elden Ring is a very big game. You know, huge. It's a very big game. But they found a sustainable way to do it. But yes, Connor, you're also correct. I think games like Red Dead Redemption 2, there's a bunch of points in Red Dead 2 where it's like, this is fun and all, but could we not cut it down? Could we not figure something out? Last of Us 2, same way. It was like, can we not, I've killed like 80 cultists. Could we not cut out this part somehow? Right. Find a different way to do it. Would that cut off the budget? By how much? And then that would alleviate some of this stress that the games industry is so freaking worried about all the time. Okay. Are we good?
We are.
Okay. All right. Let's hit the tidbit sounder. What if I told you, in this world, there are bits, and there are tids, and Richard is the only man who can put them together into tidbits?
I forgot them. Kidding.
And that was Tidbits.
That was Tidbits, yeah. A programmer by the name of Phobos Lab over on Twitter has taken the source code of the PS1 game Wipeout and made it possible to be played in a browser. The source code of Wipeout was leaked back in 2022, and he has painstakingly dug through the code in order to create this browser port. Phobos states, quote, "From what I can piece together, the source code mainly contains the Wipeout ATI 3D Rage edition of the game, a lackluster port for Windows that was bundled with ATI GPUs." While describing the process on his blog, he ended the page by saying, quote, If anyone at Sony is reading this, please consider that you have, in my opinion, 2 equally good options. Either let it be or shut this thing down and get a real remaster going. I'd love to help.
What a fucking badass. This belongs on a browser.
Yeah. Sony will leave it up.
You think so?
Wipeout's not worth it. It's a good game. It's just Mario Kart, but in the future.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, and they came out with the Wipeout Omega collection in like 3-4 years ago. No one cared.
Was Wipeout anything like Hydro Thunder?
Yeah, kind of. But in the future, with hover.
Okay.
Hover.
Okay.
Whatever.
Because I did see a little bit of gameplay, and I was like, this kind of looks like Hydro Thunder.
Yeah, you get missiles and guns and stuff. Really, really great jungle music and like European EDM and stuff like that.
I expect this on Gaming Discourse FM.
Yeah, I haven't had any Wipeout yet, but I've had European, jungle and stuff like that. Ridge Racer is basically a lot of that. So, Keith David will replace Lance Reddick as Commander Zavala in Destiny 2, the person that I believed should have replaced him if they did choose a replacement. Bungie stated, quote, Commander Zavala has been central to the story we have been telling since the original Destiny, and we have plans to continue his journey. Keith David, a prolific actor on stage and in television, film, and games, will assume the English language voice of Zavala in the final shape and beyond. Separately, Lance's existing lines in-game will remain untouched for the upcoming release.
I don't think we talked about, we may have mentioned Lance Reddick when he died.
Yeah, it was a tidbit, I believe.
Speaking about Horizon, his performance in Horizon, I think, is underrated.
Very good.
Is it Silence?
Silence, yeah.
Silence. He is such an infuriating villain.
Yes.
And a lot of the frustration that Aloy...
Effortlessly infuriating.
Yeah, he's so... it's like when you watch a Victorian period piece, and there's some like house matron that's like, oh, I see the trash has been brought in or something like that. Like that's the kind of thing that Silence would do. Like, Aloy, you're dumb. And then Aloy would fall into a trap or something because she's too angry, and he'd like walk away and dissolve because he's just a hologram or something that's been there. His performance in Horizon was top notch. Top notch.
Very, very good.
But Keith David is also a phenomenal actor.
Yes.
Famously the Arbiter. Mm-hmm. And then also, and this is something about the Thing for Xbox. Yeah. Okay. So at the end of The Thing, the movie, 1984, doesn't matter. John Carpenter classic, maybe his best movie. Keith David and Kurt Russell, right? You don't know. The point is, you don't know. One of them might be the Thing.
Both of them might be the Thing.
You don't know. They don't trust each other.
Yeah.
So they're gonna sit there and I think the last line is something like, "I guess we'll just see." Perfect ending to that movie. Perfect ending, right? The video game, which I did not like, you find Keith David's body and he's frozen and apparently dead. And then later on, you see MacReady. So it doesn't. MacReady apparently is not the Thing. It doesn't prove that Keith David wasn't the Thing.
Yeah, right.
I just don't like how they messed with that ending at all. I get why they did it, because it's like, you got to do something with the original movie.
Right. Yeah, the forceful nature of creating another branching piece of a franchise. Yeah. Well, the Thing wasn't a franchise; they forced it into a franchise.
Yeah, but that the ending to the Thing might be my favorite ending to like any movie ever. It is such a perfect, just such a perfect little ending. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anyway, okay.
In a community update post on Steam, Larian Studios has revealed that users have played a combined playtime of over 10 million hours in Baldur's Gate 3, which equates to over 1,225 years, with an all-time peak of 814,000 concurrent players on Steam. Astounding.
Yep. And it's surprising to me that the game is this popular. And I wonder if part of it isn't like TikTok videos of like people doing crazy things or something like that.
It's partially that. I think you actually are missing the absolute like explosion of tabletop gaming during COVID.
Correct.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say the absolute explosion of horny nerds because Baldur's Gate 3. I did not mention it at the beginning of the show. Every other line is like, why don't we fight and then
Well,
see
bang,
what happens?
okay.
There's a scene in an early Always Sunny episode where like Dennis, Mac, and Charlie get into an argument over which one of them is gonna bribe a banker to have sex with them. Like, it's a really weird conversation. But anyway, the scene ends with all of them taking off their shirts. And Dennis just goes, okay, now which one of us do you want to take in a back and bang you? And the banker's just like bewildered. But that's how it feels in Baldur's Gate 3. It's like every time you go to camp, every single person's like, all right, hurry up. Pick who you're going to bang. Let's go.
So the quote, the explosion of horny nerds, it's funny because Saturday started a new D&D campaign. One of the guys, brand new to D&D, he was looking up art for his character. He goes, wow, there's a lot of smut for this type of, or for Minotaurs. I'm like, yes, there's one thing you need to know about D&D players, is they are very horny.
Lots of monster lovers. Indeed.
Whoa, okay.
I'm not lying. Anyways, that's it for Tidbits.
Okay.
I got Circana, though. Circana.
Formerly NPD.
Formerly NPD, so I'll go ahead and start that and breeze through it. This didn't come from Circana, but I added it in anyways because it's video game numbers. But the Switch has hit 30 million in lifetime sales in Japan. 30 million units. So that's impressive.
Off the top of your head, do you know where the Switch is at generally?
I think it's at 110, 120 million.
Is the PlayStation 2 still the best-selling console of all time?
Yeah. Yep. I think they're around like 140, 150 million. And that's because they had a huge, after production ended when the PS3 was out after a couple years in the late 2000s, huge resurgence in South America.
Really?
Yeah. I can't remember if they were able to start selling it in South America or if it just was cheap down there. But that added a lot of sales to it.
This is off topic, but from your knowledge, was sort of the PlayStation 2 Xbox era the first, how do I word this? Was that the first time that like consoles sort of broke out of like major economic markets and sort of made their ways into lesser developed countries or sort of other markets that may not? You talk about the biggest markets in the world are like China, United States, India.
Yeah.
I don't know. The UK, Europe.
Yeah, I think so, actually. Because you had the three major markets, obviously, Europe, Japan, America.
Okay, for consoles.
Right. In Russia, they couldn't get the NES, so they created the Tandy? No, that's not right. It was a knockoff NES. And, of course, I'm sure you've seen like all of those like funny faux consoles that are like misspelled. That's all South America. Like that's all below the okay. Yeah, I think that's partially it. I know that the Sega Master System was one of the ones that was able to reach into South America, and this was the 80s. And because of that, there's a huge following in South America, and I think they're still making games to this day.
And Brazil's a pretty big games market too, isn't it?
Brazil's a big market, yeah. And you could even find, like, the Master System was a console, and the Game Gear was a handheld, but their architecture is the same.
Oh, okay.
So Brazil was taking Game Gear games and turning them into Master System games and selling them down there. So you can...
Interesting.
Yeah, okay. It was very, very wild.
That would be an interesting question to like research. If the PS2, maybe even the PS2, the first console that like largely broke out of like the major global
I think you are...
Maybe people probably
correct,
have researched that question. It's just something that popped in my head.
Yeah, anyway. No, that's actually a very good question. Something I got to think about now. What was that? Circana numbers.
Yes, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. June 2023, U.S. consumer spending on video game content, hardware, accessories reached $4.7 billion, 9% increase versus year average. It was second highest spending ever achieved in a June month, trailing only to June 2021's $4.8 billion. Spending on video game content increased by 7% when compared to a year ago, totaling $4.1 billion. Console and PC digital premium download spending in the month increased by more than 50% year on year. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that's...
Say that one more time.
Console and PC digital premium download spending in the month increased by more than 50% year on year. I don't know if that's like premium
$60
content.
to $70 game?
Yeah, I don't know if that's premium content or premium like add-ons, or we'll just move on. Content spending during the first year's half reached $22.8 billion, flat to a year ago. 8% increase in content spending on consoles and a slight gain in non-mobile subscription spending were offset by declines in the mobile and the PC, cloud, and non-console VR segments. No surprise, Diablo 4 was the best-selling game of June, instantly becoming the third best-selling game of 2023 year-to-date. 4 other new releases appeared among the top 20 best sellers, including Final Fantasy 16, Street Fighter at number 2. Final Fantasy 16 was at number 2. Street Fighter 6 was at number 3. F1 23 was at 15, and Story of Seasons: A Wonderful Life was at 17.
Oh, okay.
Launch month sales of Street Fighter 6 more than doubled those of Street Fighter 5, and back in February of 2016. And Street Fighter 6 enjoyed the highest launch month dollar sales for a head-to-head fighting game since the 2019 launch of Mortal Kombat 11. Video game hardware spending increased 22% versus year average to $454 million. The highest video game hardware spend for a June month since $617 million reached in June 2008. That was PS3. That was PS3 and Wii.
Wow. Okay.
PS3 and Wii came out in 2006. So.
Okay. I wanted to ask you a fighting game question because I dabble a bit. You roll in those circles a bit. Yeah. You know some of the names, some of the faces.
Yeah.
New Street Fighter's been received pretty well, right?
Yes, very well.
Extremely well.
Yeah. I played the beta, but I haven't gotten my chance to dig into the full game. It has mechanics that from the past games that people enjoy, particularly a parry system, which is an ability to negate attack and then come back with an attack of your own. But if someone fast enough, they can negate that attack, and it causes like a back and forth.
Oh man, okay.
So it's kind of like a very, very anime-esque moment. But yeah. And of course, the new characters look great, and the mechanics. So it's a very good-looking game as well. So, but yes, it's doing very well for itself, and it's also I think highest viewership in Evo, which was last week or 2 weeks ago. Okay. So. Where was that? Year-to-date hardware spending remains 23% higher when compared to the same period in 2022 at $2.6 billion. Of course, no surprise, PS5 is the best-selling hardware platform in both unit and dollar sales. Consumer spending on PlayStation hardware reached its highest June total since 2008. That when Metal Gear Solid 4 came out?
I have no idea. If it came out in 2008, people didn't play it till 2009 because it took forever to install. So, sorry.
No. It installed in 4 parts after ejact. You asshole.
And Snake told you not to smoke during the install.
And then you'd have to force to watch him smoke for 10 minutes.
I apologize. And he also told you to take breaks. I'm sorry. I apologize. You are correct, Richard.
Accessory spending during June increased 14% when compared to a year ago. Totaling $214 million. The top 4 best-selling accessories in dollar sales were PlayStation 5 DualSense controllers, led by the DualSense Edge, which is their new controller.
New, Elite.
Yeah, for those who aren't good enough on regular controllers, losers. I have a.
Do you have a story?
No, I don't have a story. I'm sorry, but I just have like a weird hatred towards like modifiable controllers.
Oh yeah.
I just have that. You're not good enough to play on the original controller, dummy. I'm gatekeepy that way.
Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Gaming Discourse. Go to our YouTube channel, YouTube/Gaming Discourse, Patreon.com/The Gaming Discourse, Gaming Discourse FM, new episodes Wednesday, and new episode this Wednesday, yes?
Yes, yeah.
There we go. Okay. And we will see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.